Here we go. We're recording. Welcome, everyone, to this week's installment of Let's Talk Horses, Life and Living. Interesting conversations with inspiring people. And I have someone very special on my podcast, very first time. Welcome, Gareth Maré. Thank you so much for being here with me.
Thank you. Thank you for getting my name right. Everyone normally just calls me Gareth Maré.
Well, I read it and I thought that, but then I went through your Facebook page a little bit, and I find it interesting, people's names, like, and how sometimes they correlate so closely to the person. And I'm sure, Mayor probably comes out of most people's mouths because there's such a easy link between the two things.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
So, Gareth, you're the founder of Heartfelt Horsemanship, and I've been reading a little bit about your background, and so interesting how how you came to where you are in life at the moment. But the first question I like to ask my guests when they haven't been on here before is, how did horses come into your life? How did it all begin with you and horses?
So, I've been around horses pretty much my whole life. In terms of how it ended up being a profession, I didn't follow horses as a career, and even my first passion is animal sciences. Even that I didn't have as a profession because, like many people, I had to work to pay my way through studies. And by the time I qualified for my studies that I wanted to do, I had hooked myself into a life of corporate and got addicted to that drug they call a salary.
Yes.
So it's hard to walk away from and start over again. Until I burnt out and I went through a personal tragedy and ran away to the mountains and ended up working with horses. Yeah.
Wow. And what part of South Africa do you live in?
I live in KwaZulu-Natal. It's on the east coast of the Indian Ocean. Very wild. KwaZulu actually means heaven. And then the Natal part's just from the colonial era.
Uh-huh. And is that where you grew up, or you grew up in another part of the country?
No, I was born in KwaZulu-Natal. I've obviously traveled quite a bit and worked outside of the country and outside of the province for short periods of time, but always been pretty close to where I grew up.
Wow. And what was it like growing up there?
Fantastic. When I was, as a kid on the farm, that was amazing. You could just, days off school, you would just get up early and walk as far as you can go. Moving to the city, South Africa has a kind of parallel economy. We think of it as a third world country, but our cities are typical cities. When I was about 11, I moved to the city, and I didn't fit in well, and that kind of kicked off my rebellion.
That's so cool. And it's so interesting, Gareth. I so often find my podcast guests come on, and there's so many similarities between, I guess, like the life that I've lived and the people that I end up connecting with around the world on this podcast, and how, because it was very similar for me. I moved into a corporate job, and the same sort of thing. I was like, this is just too good. I was living in Sydney here in Australia, and very young and earning a very good wage. But then same sort of thing. I got to a point where I was like, I cannot do this anymore. And I actually went and worked for the RSPCA for a couple of years and just learned so much about animals through just being hands-on and being on the job. So yeah, it's so interesting how connected we are around the world. And this is I guess is my point of this podcast, really, is to bring people together through horses. But there's so much in our lives, I feel like people that are interested in horses on this level have so many of these similar kind of stories and upbringings where, there's a certain level of trauma or tragedy weaved throughout our lives. There's places where we've tried to fit into like mainstream, reality and society. And but what I find so interesting is how it all circles back to the horses.
Yeah, absolutely. The community thing is important for me. I presented at Warwick Schiller's Journey on Summit in Birmingham, and it was a real eye-opener for me and inspiration for me that we do have a community. It just might be spread around the whole planet. So like this, us weird people that are having a different approach to horses and animals in general, there are far more of us than we think. It's just, the old structures are so set in place that we think that that's all there is. So I think it's important for these kind of things where it sets up a greater community, that we don't feel so isolated. And that isolation, what I find with my clients and my students, that isolation is the biggest demotivator and have people want to give up. And it's not a case of give up and go back to what they used to do. You have people literally leave the equine world because, I feel isolated, and they leave. So this is a very important thing of having that global community of people to fall back on.
Yeah. And to know that even though you're not doing it the same as everyone else, like I know myself when I started, really wanting to get into learn more about being a better horse person and, being able to communicate better with my horses. You naturally go out and start studying and watching different people, but a lot of the time I tried to do the things that they would teach, and I would feel wrong because I'm like, this is not sitting correctly in my world. So it must be me that's doing the wrong thing. But it's so interesting how, in actual fact, I think that we're so aware of what's being told to us, not really matching what the horses are trying to tell us. Yeah. And that's where I think also people like you, Warwick Schiller, some of these people that are really becoming a lot more mainstream now have such an important role. And I don't mean to make it so significant, but it's sort of like this thing of like, it's so necessary, it's so required in the horse world these days.
Yeah, the way I see it, there's so many different approaches. People talk about horse first, and everyone's got a different perspective on what this horse first thing is. You talk to any equestrian, you look on their social media pages, everyone's posting, love the horse more than you love the sport. And sometimes when you look from the outside, it's, well, that doesn't really line up. I think it's important to be a little less judgmental on it. Everyone's got a different set of priorities. So like what you're discussing there, I might go learn from someone and think, well, jeepers, I feel so wrong because it doesn't actually match my priorities, what resonates with me. As far as I'm concerned, everyone that's trying to consider the horse more is an ally. There's no competitors yet. It's because there are people that come to me to learn, and maybe they're a little bit straight line towards getting the fancy stuff or a competitive career. And then there's people that I know that are better suited to that, because that is not my drive. My drive is a relaxed, happy horse that's going to keep you safe. I have this burning thing inside me that there are children that are learning to ride today that will ride their whole lives and die at the ripe old age of 98 and never fall off a horse. I believe it's possible with the information we have available now. That's my heart. The guys that are going to want to go jump 1.5 meters, they're probably not going to have that experience, and I can send them to someone that's better suited to that.
Yeah, totally. And I love that there's people coming through in the horse world now as well, because I think the other thing that turns a lot of people away is the competitive and judgmental nature of the horse industry. It's very cliquey, and there's in each country it's very different. I mean, we're a very big equine loving people here in Australia, but a lot of them it is this thing of like, well, I don't really want to hang out with you people because you're highly mean and judgmental to one another, and it's like it doesn't feel fun at all. Whereas for me, it's like exactly like you said, it's like these animals are here to teach us about joy, to teach us about not judge. Like they don't judge, they don't have any concept of what being judgmental means. And so it's such a differing opinion when you come around these animals and you see people behaving this way. But I would love to hear, how did heartfelt horsemanship come about? Like, can you tell me a little bit and tell the listeners a little bit about, like, what drove you to create this?
I think there was an automatic component to it, but like I mentioned, I ran away to the mountains. My daughter died when she was 11 years old in 2006. That's when I was still in corporate, and that ended up being the catalyst for me, the running away to the mountains. I looked around and how life must just carry on. And, literally, like minutes after her dying in the hospital, people were having me sign forms and wanting to go through all the bureaucracy. And you wake up the next morning and things don't change. Life doesn't stop, and we just don't take things seriously. And for me at that moment, when I was looking around, I was like, none of this matters. We're running around for things that don't matter. I want to have more consequence. Like, I want more weight to my breath. And I don't know if that makes sense to you. Yep. That every breath carries a little more weight. And it just ended. I didn't think, I'm going to run away and go work with horses. I just ran completely unconsciously. I was hitchhiking, and I would ask the people that were giving me a lift as I was hitchhiking, to take me to the town the furthest town I could see on the next signboard. And I ended up in a little mountain village called Underberg, and it just so happened that I ended up working with horses. And I had an experience there with a youngish wild horse that really brought me a ton of healing. It was absolute connection with an absolutely wild animal. And like you were talking about the non-judgmental thing, when you go through a personal trauma like that and your whole world is rocked, the human reaction is, let me tell you how you're going to fix yourself. Whereas with that little mare, it was purely a thing of just her coming and being with me. And it was a moment where time stood still. It was non-judgmental. It was not offering advice. It was silent, generous time. And over that time where I was just working with training ranch horses. I wasn't doing anything fancy. And I had this burning desire to just work with horses. And I started getting a little bit of a reputation, and people asked me to help with things. And from the competition world, I started to see that disconnect that we had of a conventional way of making the horse do things and the resulting trouble, the undesirable behaviors that pop up. And I figured out, actually, I can help horses with this. And it felt like something that I could give back. So I could be more of a voice for the horse. And that's where I decided, okay, well, I will help more horses. But my delusions about, I'll just train the horses, I don't need to work with the people, came crashing down when I realized you could train a horse for 3 years and give it to someone that hasn't been taught what you've taught the horse, and it's all gone. So that's where heartfelt horsemanship came about. It's got to be that change of our heart and how we approach the horses. So it became more people-focused than just the horses.
Wow. And how did you find that transitioning? Because there's so many people, horse people that I speak to that are like of this vein, where they see horses and they want to help the horses, and then the same realization comes where they're like, oh no, now I need to involve the people component.
Yeah, I was so out of my depth that I actually did a CPD course on psychology. I was like, I don't know what I'm doing yet. But at the end of the day, horses taught me how to do it. I've always maintained, we know that horses can't be naughty, horses can't be stubborn. They are just responding from the pool of their experiences. They're either trying to survive, or they are responding with their learned behavior of what has helped them survive in the past. And I've known that for a long time. But it took a lot for the penny to drop after doing the psychology and it not helping me at all. Or maybe I'll bring in some of it in terms of my teaching. But the realization came in that people are the same. We can't get judgy about people. They are also responding to that desire to defend themselves and what they've learned. Even the people that we think, oh, they're abusing horses, no, that's what they've been taught. So they've been taught that, and very often taught that in the 4 to 8 year age group, which is where we develop our values. It's very hard to rewire your values once you've been taught them between 4 and 8. And so that gave me a sense of humility around people, and it was a lot easier to teach people once I looked at it from that point of view.
Yeah, that's so cool. And I haven't ever heard anyone talk about it quite that way. And it's so true. I think we're all trying to do the best that we can with the tools that we have available to us. Like we look at our parents and the way we were brought up, and, it's easy to criticize some of the things my mom did when I was young. But you know what? It's like, and then I realized she was literally doing the absolute best she could with the tools she had available to her at the time. And I think until you're ready to question yourself and question everything around you, which is such a brave thing to do. And I think most people stay within that realm of the tools that they have and not really going outside of it, because there's such a level of courage required to almost like push against some of that stuff and really be willing to be the change, like the element of change, be the changer, be the person willing to kind of push back and say, you know what, actually, there's got to be a different way. There's got to be a better way to do this.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, the parent analogy is great. Like everyone is just working within the environment that they have had given to them. So we, like you say, trying the best you can. With horses, I can guarantee every person that is involved in horses has that starting point of seeing a horse for the first time and just wanting to connect to them. At that moment, I can promise you, no one was thinking about Olympic medals or ribbons. They were thinking about, I just want to be with that horse. And possibly you think about, I want to ride it. But that childlike wonder of horses, we all share that. And that is, for me, when we're looking at the stuff that we're seeing in the equine world now, where abuse is exposed, and we're looking at it with fresh eyes, I almost don't want to see the faces, because the face still belongs to one of those children in wonder of a horse. It is, don't hate the player, hate the game. It's the industry that's made us like this. Absolutely, those people need to be sanctioned, and we need to do something about it. But we want them to reform. We don't want them to never have anything to do with horses. We want to see a change in the industry, and that comes from actual enforcement of rules, actual acknowledgement of the science. That's what we're seeing at the moment with the equine industry. Is we're not adopting the new science that's coming out. Instead of us hating on people, let's maybe focus on that.
Yeah, and I'd love to look a little bit more at that science and what you've learned, because I know you've put a lot of time into studying a lot of that stuff. And I've just started, doing some of my own research and really starting to realize the truth about how horses function as a being, as a creature. But I just want to quickly touch on, because there's been a lot lately coming up in especially social media. I mean, the day and age we live in, where you can see a video of someone doing something. The video may last 10 seconds, it may last 30 seconds, it may last a minute or two. And the complete crucifixion of people for their actions without any context that's placed around this stuff. And I just want to quickly get your take even on, because, you talked about the reforming of the industry and the rules needing to be, the science needing to be brought into it. But what about the people aspect for you? Like where do you sort of, where do you reconcile in your world that sort of behavior and being able to, like you said, not you don't want to see the face, because then it's that being, that child that was once there. Like, is it compassion? Is it like, what is that for you with that part of what we see in the world now? Like, I mean, and I mean, like, in order to change it, like, I'm interested in helping people and looking at how we can change some of this stuff, really.
I think I'm like anyone else. When you initially see it, anger is the first thing, and you get angry at the person, you blame the person. I've been doing this for 20 years, and I've been that warrior out there pointing fingers and saying, you're doing this wrong, and it just makes people dig their heels in. We need to find a way to talk to that child, so that child within everyone. But it does take education, because what is the first response that most of these people have? Maybe not the people themselves, but the people that defend the behaviors, is, but horses are dangerous. You sometimes have to punish them to keep. That first response is the thing we have to re-educate. Not coming out with the torches and pitchforks. We need to educate people that horses are a peaceful animal unless they're under threat. The dangerous horses are dangerous because people come at them with whips and chains, and they're defending themselves against an aggressive predator with tools. That is what they're defending themselves against. So for me, kind education is very important. Now, there are people on that social media platform that I value a lot, that have incredibly thick skins and, almost hearts of pure stone, but they are incredibly necessary. The people that are doing the exposés, they come under a ton of fire. I would never be able to do that stuff, and I'm definitely not called to do that stuff, but they still matter. They're still doing God's work. When it comes down to it, they're still doing the important stuff. Everyone's got a role to play, and those that are there to highlight where it's going wrong, and then I think the people educating need to have a little bit of a softer feel to it, and saying it doesn't need to be this way. And we need more people that are saying, oh, look what it can be like. And I know, because I've been in that place of trying to prove a point. I competed, even though I'm not a competitive person, and I've got my championships under my belt. Every championship and every new discipline, someone just came up with another excuse about why it's different in a different discipline or at a different level. So people will always find a way to say, oh, that's fine for your paddock ornament, but it doesn't work for top level competitive horses. Those horses need a firm hand. If they need a firm hand, then we need to look at changing the competitive world. We need to change that expectation. We can't just continue to defend, well, we've got to do this in order to win. Racing is an example for me when we talk about, to maintain a competitive edge, we need the whip. Okay. So this is no hill to die on, I'm just using it as an analogy. But if we took out the whip, everyone would be on a level playing field. If we raised the racing age to 4, everyone would still be on that level playing field. So yes, there's been enough studies to prove that the angle of movement reduces on a racing horse as they get older. So you're going to see slower times if they started at 4, but everyone's going to have those slower times. So I do think we need to have a look at the change to the industry. That's got to come at the level of those people campaigning and pointing it out, and keep prodding at the FEI, keep prodding at Jockey Club, until they say, okay, well, let's change the playing field, level it for everyone, but make it better for horses. And then the other side of it is the people educating the general population that we don't just accept what those organizations are saying.
And it's, I mean, I have an off-the-track thoroughbred. The thoroughbred racing industry in Australia is a huge, it's a huge sport. It's obviously a huge capital, earner for a lot of people as well. It's a very, I would say, a money-driven thing above all else. Animal welfare is slowly getting better, but it's definitely not at the forefront of this stuff. And, we bought an off the track thoroughbred who's, I mean, she's 13 or 14 now and raced when she was young, but even seeing the things in her body now that are just directly impacted from how the first year or 2 years of her life played out. And even just, it's just interesting because I love what you're saying, because in the end, the horses will benefit. The horses are the ones that will benefit from all of this. And in turn, we will benefit, obviously, but it's this thing where it's not about stopping it or making anyone wrong. It's truly, I love that point of view, that it's about educating people so they know. I mean, earlier on you were saying something and it reminded me of that saying, frustration begins where knowledge ends. It's like we get frustrated in a space where we don't have the information and the knowledge to know how to figure something out and how to work it out in a logical or intelligent way. And we turn to those almost like, I don't know, Neanderthal sort of behaviors that we have ingrained in us, rather than actually learning about something and applying the things that we know to get a better outcome. So what sort of things have you learned lately in your research of horses? I mean, I sort of feel like even people that are in this industry that are very high up still lack some of this basic knowledge about how the horse brain works and those sort of things.
Yeah, look, that statement that I was saying earlier about horses will only do one of two things: what they think they needed to survive, or what they've learnt. That's nothing new. I think Tom Durrance and Ray Hunt used to talk about that stuff like ages ago. It's nothing new, but it hasn't been absorbed. And then you see the work of Dr. Stephen Peters on the neurology side of it, the equine neurology, about the development of the frontal lobe. And it's very important that we clarify horses have a frontal lobe, because you have people picking up on this information and everything gets made extreme. And people say, oh, horses don't have a frontal lobe. Or they say they've got undeveloped frontal lobe, so they're less intelligent. That's not entirely accurate. As far as I'm concerned, horses are more intelligent than us. It's a higher level of evolution to be more in the moment than this thing that we do, where we're always living in the future and we're worried about what's coming. But what it does mean is the cartoons and the memes about your horses sitting overnight in the barn planning where they're going to spook, that's not happening. And they are incapable of distance forward planning. And so we're talking about, they can plan ahead. They can plan, let's say, and this is not exact science, but roughly 6 functions ahead, and that's about 2 minutes. And that planning is always about keeping themselves safe or finding comfort, or food. Their list of priorities is safety, comfort, and then food. And why this is important to me is, if we stop thinking about it as our horse is out to get us, it's being naughty, it's being stubborn, it needs to be punished, it needs to be corrected, we can actually start getting safety from our horses. I don't know if it's a thing there, but there's quite a few people here that, if a horse spooks, back it. So you got to punish the spook. All you're doing is confirming that horse's fear. It's like, I was scared of something and then something bit me. So but it goes beyond that. It goes, the horse that's not going forward in the school is not doing it just for the hell of it. It's either not understanding, maybe it's got low motivation, but then we motivate it on a psychological level rather than try and beat the living daylights out of it, because you're going to cause neural fatigue, which means that when people talk about a dead-sided horse, the nerves just get deadened. Or the other side of that is they get kicked no matter what, or they get contact no matter what, and they never get a release for it. And why move forward? So then we get medieval and we bring in harsher tools and bigger spurs, bigger whips, and eventually you can throw everything at the horse and nothing gets him going. So for me, that work that Dr. Stephen Peters and other neuroscientists are doing regarding equine psychology is critical for us to understand that they're not out to get us. They're not being naughty. When you face resistance, try and get more understanding rather than get more firm.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, I thank you. I love that so much. And even if you come back to those three things that you said that the horses are seeking, which was safety, comfort, and food, was that the...
Yes, yeah, that's the order of the hierarchy, yeah.
Yeah, like really, if you looked at those as their motivators, and then you looked at the behavior that you're trying to, you know, help them with, let's say, where does like any kind of physical, you know, physical force give them any of those things, where it's just like us. I think if people were willing to also realize the things that we truly value in ourselves and truly value in our lives, we actually are so much more similar to horses, I think, than a lot of people are willing to acknowledge. I mean, I think a lot of us are also seeking that comfort and that safety within ourselves, within our environment, and within the people that we choose to surround ourselves with as well.
Yeah. Yeah. That's that saying, seek to understand before seeking to be understood. I think that's critical for both the human aspect and the horse aspect. Yeah. Understand what's causing a behavior and understand what will motivate them to change a behavior. Now, a lot of people, this sounds very esoteric at the moment, but behavioral science is there to help us with these things. If we learn to understand the motivators, we understand what motivates undesirable behavior, we can take away those motivators, and how to shape and form desirable behaviors. So that's where we get to the whole operant conditioning thing. But it also goes beyond that. It goes where people assign personality traits. Yep. The most common things I see when a horse is displaying dangerous behavior, people say, oh, the horse isn't scared, it is just a dominant horse. Now, dominance theory has also been debunked. So it's that whole wolf study that they did on domesticated wolves.
Yep.
The actual author of that study redid it on wild animals and said, okay, it was entirely wrong. That was because of the artificial situation that those wolves were kept in, and they don't actually have that alpha thing that so many men are got their hearts set on at the moment. How that affects how we interact with horses is important too. We hang on to that because we can say, oh, there's an excuse for me defending myself against this dominant horse. Where horses don't actually have a pyramid hierarchy. They've got individual interpersonal relationships. And in most cases, when people tell me they've got a dominant horse, it's an insecure horse. And we're trying to meet it with force, and it makes it worse. So when people say, oh, that's the dominant alpha mare, and I look at it and I watch the behavior, that is even when they're interacting with other horses, that's the insecure animal. That's, leave me alone. And if we want to help those horses when they're interacting with humans, we should actually be softer with them, not harder.
Yeah. And it's a perfect example. I have two horses that live here with me in Australia, just in my backyard here, my gelding and my mare. And, you know, my gelding is exactly that. He's the one that you think if people were looking at him, they'd be like, you know, he's an asshole. He picks on her. He's mean. He's bossy. And I'm like, he is a horse that requires a lot of the extra, like he seeks out physical comfort, whereas she's so stoic. She's like, you know, I'm happy if you feed me and we have a bit of fun together. I'm so cool with all of this. And it's so interesting really watching them and seeing them from that perspective, where the things that we've tried to make real is just, it's so interesting. I just love even just sitting and watching them and seeing the things that they're showing me through their behavior. So I would love to hear, Gareth, about some of your horses. I've followed you on Instagram and Facebook, and I see the horses that you interact with. Can you tell us a little bit about your horses at home and how they, how they impact you, how they motivate you, how they, help you, I guess?
Okay, so I've got a herd of 10 horses at various ages of development and ages. My oldest boy is 20. He's the one I've got 3 of my 4 national championships with. A lot of people talk about that one horse that made them look at things differently.
Yeah.
I didn't really have that because I didn't own a horse till I think my mid-30s. I was working with horses, but I didn't own any horses. And I was always working with troubled horses. So everyone else's horses made me look at things differently. But he was actually the horse that showed me how good it could be. He was, when I was first getting going, his owner took a gamble on me. He was one of the Appaloosa breeders in South Africa, and he had this horse at that stage he was an in-hand champion in South Africa. His father was an international champion, and the kind of horse that I could never afford. But he sent him to me for training. He said, "Okay, cool. Show us what you can do with him ridden," because he obviously wasn't competing in the ridden classes yet. And he had abilities in him that I didn't know how to tap into, but he taught me a lot of that, and he made me look good. He really did. So taking a calm, relaxed approach with him, he took me to national championships and made people look at it, the empathetic approach as a little bit more of a serious light. My other older horse, well, not older, she's only 18 now. She was the first horse that I bought, and I just absolutely fell in love with her. She's a tiny little 14-hand, rather plain-looking horse, and everyone says that no one would buy her for her flash, but I always tell people, find one conformational flaw in her, and you won't. But her temperament, we call her our little unicorn. Her temperament is amazing. And when I was training that horse, I asked for a cover, and we bred a baby. Craig, the owner, the breeder of Dream Hunter, that national champion that I was training, he was sending him out to stud every year, and every year he'd go out to stud and come back, and there'd be difficulties that came back from how he was handled by the various places that were breeding to him. And eventually this stuff started to break my heart a little, and I called Craig and said, "Look, I think you need to take Dream Hunter. I can't keep going back and forth."
Yeah.
And he said, "Cool, I'll come fetch him tomorrow." And he arrived, but he didn't have a trailer with him. So I didn't know what was going on, but he actually had the papers, and he signed them over to me. So that was pretty incredible. Apparently, he came to Craig in a dream and said, "No, he needs to be owned by me." So I'm very appreciative of that dream.
That's amazing. And just quickly, I just want to loop a couple of things in here together, and I don't really know how this question is going to come across or if it'll make sense, but I know you're a very through this podcast and our conversation, you've spent a lot of time learning about the science of horses and how they learn, how they function. But then you get a horse like, what was his name? Dream
Hunter.
Dream Hunter. Oh, isn't that funny that his name's Dream Hunter and then it came in the dream?
Yeah.
You get a horse like Dream Hunter where, you guys had this connection with each other where he was teaching you, he brought this side out in you and showed you these different things and all that sort of stuff. what do you like? What do you get is beyond the science as well. Like I have this like half thing where I need to know the logics behind things. I need that information. I need to know how things work. But then I've also got this part of me where I'm like, I call it like the magic or like the
Yeah.
unknown or something like that. Like, can you just talk even briefly about like how for you those two things, if they do, how those two things kind of go together, or your experience with that, or
Yeah.
yeah.
Look, the magic has been a part of my journey all the way through. That's first of all, wild mare. That to me was pure magic. But the scientific brain sits and tries to explain it away.
Yeah.
And I don't necessarily think that's a bad thing. I do think
No.
I personally
Yeah.
have a tendency to weigh a little too heavy on the science. Um, so, like, for a long time, I felt that magic, but I explained a lot of it away through the science.
Yeah. Yeah.
And eventually, the thing that kind of tipped me, because I used to be 50-50, half science, half magic. I now think I'm probably 80% magic and 80% I believe the magic and 20% the science. I had an experience with a little zebra filly that was orphaned and completely wild, so not hand reared. And I had that same connection experience that I had with that wild horse with a wild zebra. And that was beyond explaining through science. That was her whole story. Um, I did a little video on our YouTube channel explaining it a little more, and I'm busy writing a book which goes into full detail about that experience. But that leaned me more towards the magic. The reality of it is they are intertwined. We need to feel that magic. The science lets us measure the magic.
Yeah.
The science is there to measure any experience we have. People talk about. So when I got started in the horse world, and I was coming in with all these crazy ideas, which were science-based, but people would meet it with, but I've got 30, 40 years experience, and I know that this is right and you're wrong. And now that I've got a little more experiences, I try not to fall into that trap, because most of those people that used to say that, they didn't have 30 years experience. They had the same year experience 30 times over. If we're not constantly looking to change, we don't have 30 years experience. We're just repeating the same thing over and over again.
Yeah.
So that's where the science is helpful for me. If I look at something that happened and I have I say, okay, well, this is my anecdotal evidence that this is fact. If I don't have a way to measure that, and I don't take into account variables, and I don't take into account the methodology, I'm restricting my knowledge and restricting my growth. So I do believe in the magic. Right now, I lean more towards the magic than I do towards the science. But funny enough, I don't teach that because I want to teach people critical thinking. The magic is going to come from the horses. They're here to teach us about connection and that magic. And I will never I'll never deny that the magic exists. But when it comes to the teaching, that's got to be a personal thing. And teaching the science base of, let's be critical thinkers. Don't say, well, I've seen this horse push that horse, therefore, in my experience, all the science is wrong. You're taking thousands of horses that are used in a study to dismiss, you're dismissing 5 horses experience with thousands of horses and a solid science background and methodology. We've got to measure our magic.
Yeah. And I think as well, even the science is continually evolving. I mean, it was science-based when we had a dominance theory mentality with how we train dogs and how we train horses. And like, it's Yeah, and I honestly think even the science, it's almost like the magic has an effect on the science in a way. It's like as we're willing to open ourselves more to that side of the universe, of this planet, of whatever that is, then everything has an effect on everything, and everything starts to open up in that way as well. But I think I'm very much the same because I think when you're teaching someone something, you need to have kind of quantifiable, points and methods and ways to do things. And I love what you said, because the magic is so personal. It's such a personal experience for each person, and it's really not something that can be taught. I think really all we can do as horse people, as clinicians, if that's what you do, as educators, as facilitators, like whatever that is kind of almost lead by example and be that person that displays the magic or whatever that is for you. And through that, I find is the biggest invitation for other people to go, I want that. Like whatever he's doing, whatever she's doing, there's something in that I would like to have more of in my world.
Yeah. I think you have a lot of people say, but the science was wrong here. I think I even said it when I was talking about the dominance. The science was wrong. The science wasn't wrong. The science was limited. Science is limited by our imagination. That guy that did that original study, I can't remember his name right now, he didn't imagine that it would be different in a wild situation until he did. And that's where that magic comes in. The magic is that imagination. We need to continually grow our imagination of what we're studying. And science is testing hypotheses, testing theories. We need a theory to test. And that's where our knowledge of magic grows is, I have a theory that this magic is happening and we can test it. That inspiring that we're talking about is just planting the seed for people to think bigger and see that it's looking a little different, and then get it confirmed by science. That testing those theories, even that has a limit to me. There's certain things that I'm like, I actually don't want to know. That was magical enough. I don't need to know more. But when it comes to can testing this theory and confirming this theory help the lives of horses? Absolutely. That's where the balance of science. I talk about in our course where what we do is balancing science, soul, and sensibility, because it appeals to some people where it's all soul, like it's all just about the feel and the intuition. And that's great. If that appeals to you, then go with that. And then you get the people that are all practical, all sensibility, and it's all the nuts and bolts. It's none of the soul and all the science. For me, it's about balancing those things out. You need the sensibility to go with the soul. If you were getting on an airplane and you're a highly intuitive person, would you want to fly the plane instead of the pilot that's intuitive and's got the knowledge? Or would you leave it to someone that's actually got the balance of the sensibility and the soul?
Yeah. I love that. And it makes me so excited to know that, there's so many things in the world that you end up being a little, I don't know, sort of disheartened about the future that we're heading into in some ways. There's a lot of things going on in the world. There's a lot of leaders in power where it's sort of like, oh, goodness, like, where are we going? And then, I meet people like you, and there's so many of us out there that have such a statesmanship mentality where it's really about the betterment of all, of everyone, of mankind, of the planet and of the animals. And I'm so excited that that there's people like you, and it makes me so much more interested and invested in getting this message out to the world, because I think deep down there's so many seekers out there. There's so many people looking for this stuff that that just need to find it and be willing to, go against those things, as we spoke about earlier in the podcast, that they were brought up to believe is true, and actually figure out some of this stuff and create a different future. So thank you so much. This has been such an epic conversation.
Thank you.
Yeah, amazing. So I think we'll wrap it up there. I would love to call this part one of possibly a 2-part podcast. I'd love to get you back on maybe in a couple of months' time, and I often find the first time I chat to someone, we sort of cover a lot of things, and then maybe we can do an episode and deep dive into a few more things and obviously see what else you're up to in the world. Is there anything at all you'd like to leave us with, Gareth, before we wrap up on today's podcast?
Sure. I thought I was prepared. I think the big thing at the moment is for people to not just find an ethical way, it's find an ethical way that resonates with them. And that's going to be different. And even within the movement to be more ethical around horses, there's division. And it's unnecessary. There's going to be something for everyone. So just find that thing that resonates with you and stick with it. So stick with it. If it resonates with you, even if you're starting to, like you're saying, feel wrong, it's probably just pointing out a growth point for you. But if it resonates with the philosophy resonates, then follow through.
Yeah, and be willing to get out of that, you call it the comfort zone, whatever it is for you, that place where we know beyond there we can create real change. And I think sometimes we're taught that what is uncomfortable is hard or tough, when really when we're willing to go there, it's such a big game changer and such an invitation for us to step in and step up to be more of us and more of an influence in this world. And I love that so much. Thank you so much, because for me, it's people like you that inspire me to go there and not back down from what I know to be true, even if not many other people that I'm around necessarily believe in it. Like, having that, like a true leader is someone that's willing to go, no matter if anyone else is following them or not. It's that energy of you follow what is true for you. And thank you so much. This has been amazing. I'm so grateful that you took the time with us to come on here. And thank you again.
Great stuff. Thank you very much.
Thank you.